So David, I was looking over your resume. I know you have a lot. I mean, you have a really amazing like background. Like you are a seven-time cabaret dance champion. You were a finalist on America's Got Talent, co-director of is it pronounced Paradiso Dance?
Paradiso, yeah, that's right.
You're the director of the social emotional learning at the Middle School 88 in Brooklyn. You've been teaching in New York since '93. You're a life coach with strategic intervention. You're a facilitator of the nonviolent communication with nycnvc.com. You're a classroom trainer with Outward Bound, circle keeper with Planning Change, and you're the author of four books for teenagers. So that's
Yeah,
amazing.
basically, if God had to save somebody, I was higher on the list maybe than some others.
Hmm. And so, David, before we start discussing your book, A COVID Story, do you mind talking about your background in education and dance, and
Yeah, absolutely.
how you got started in both, like what were and who were some of your key inspirations growing up in both, like to make you get involved in wanting to get into education and also into dance.
Yeah, I was a religion major in college. I was studying, I knew something existed beyond this world, the conventional, what we see physically. And I thought to myself, boy, I just want to go to India and study under a guru of some sort. My mother said, no, you're going to college. And I was like, okay. At that point, my mother still had a lot of power over me. So I went to a hippie school, Hampshire College, that let me visit India as part of an exchange program. And when I was there, I meditated with a bunch of gurus and found, wow, I'm really not very good at this. And I thought I had actually found myself in a different way. I said, I'm not actually good at meditation. I'm not good at spirituality. I'm actually good at just thinking, and I like people. And that's when I decided to become a school teacher. I did Teach for America back in 1993. It's third year in inception. I did 3 years in the South Bronx and found a calling of mine that I just love. I love thinking and I love being around people. And there's no better way to do it than being an educator. That was how it started. During that time, I didn't speak Spanish, and a lot of the kids that I taught, their parents only spoke Spanish. So I went to Guatemala to study Spanish and did okay, just enough to communicate a little bit. And I found dancing there. I was like, oh, one night we went out dancing, and I saw this really ugly guy dance with all these beautiful women. And I thought to myself, yeah, I need to learn how to do that. So when I got back to New York, I started taking some classes. I wasn't very good, but I was determined and learned how to dance and eventually joined the dance group. And again, I wasn't very good, but I was good at lifting people. So the head dancer took me under his wing and said, all right, this is what we're going to do. Me and my wife were fighting all the time. And I need somebody to just lift my wife because we fight. So yeah, I'll do that. So in all these performances, the salsa dancers would look beautiful, do all these fancy moves. They would do that for 2, 3 minutes. I'd come on stage. I'd do all these massive flips and super spectacular stuff. And I would go off stage and the dancer would come back. And I actually made a decent living and performed a lot doing that. And I thought to myself, I'm really not that good at this dancing thing, but the acrobatics, that's something that captivates the audience. Why don't I just do that full time? And I met somebody, my dance partner, wife, and then ex-wife, unfortunately, but wife for some for some time. We did these spectacular shows where we just did acrobatics, and we did acrobatics as dance. From there, we got on America's Got Talent. We did pretty well. We were the semifinalists back in about 11 years ago, a while back, and that propelled our career like nobody's business. Then we started traveling around the world just on our own. That credential was enormous for us. And that sort of brought me, during that time, I was still a school teacher for the most part. I would work during the day, and during the evenings, we would train. And on the weekends, we would do shows. It was a really great time in my life. And after about 20 years of teaching, I shifted from, it was interesting. My principal wanted me to focus. She noticed that, yeah, I'm a good English teacher, but she said, you do this thing about building community. Why don't you do that full time? And just about that time, social emotional learning was getting a little bigger in New York City. We're from one of the first schools to have a director and a coordinator for social emotional learning. And that made a huge difference in our school. Suspension rates dropped by 50%. There was a huge press conference with the mayor, the chancellor, the police commissioner. We did amazing stuff in our school. And to this day, we really focus a lot, not just on kids' academics, but how they are social emotionally. And because of that, kids' lives are better. That's something I'm super passionate about. And I think that's a history of who I am.
Wow.
That's a little long-winded. I apologize, but
No, no, no. It's great. When you were in India, were you, I guess, at the time interested in, were you doing meditation or into yoga?
I was. And again, I wasn't very good at it. It was the attraction to something spiritual was more, the breathing meditation is more like calming the mind. And I was more interested in thinking, what is it about this world? And I realized I was more of a philosopher than the meditator. And that was kind of the schism that pushed me away from studying religion as a formal activity, whether in college or whether doing it as a monk of some sort. I'm definitely not a monk. I thought I might have been, but the more I tried, the more I realized, no, this is not for me.
And the middle school that you taught at in Brooklyn, what part of Brooklyn, which neighborhood?
Sure, it's right outside Park Slope, Middle School 88.
Okay.
Yeah,
And have you ever worked like in charter schools in the city?
I haven't. I worked for 2 years, 3 years in the South Bronx. I worked for 4 years at School of Future and a year at Ballet Tech, and then the rest of my time at Middle School 88. Middle School 88 is like my home. All my friends are there. We're a big family. It's a special place. People go there. You can feel the camaraderie there, and it's a wonderful community.
And have you ever taught like dance to kids?
I'm so glad you asked that. I would say, I've been teaching now for over 25 years. The number one thing I think I did that was special, we had a acrobatic salsa group, and for a number of years, not only did I teach salsa dance, I also taught kids some acrobatics stuff you would see on Dancing with the Stars. Nothing too complicated, but enough that it was still a bit showy. And I had kids who would never come to school suddenly wanting to come to school. To this day, I still get calls from the kids and asking me, "Hey, when are you going to set up the next team?" And they were so proud to be able to dance with each other and then actually physically move in a way that it's possible if you're taught right. And I think I'm a pretty good teacher, and they were able to do great work. That I'm most proud of. We did that for about 3 or 4 years. The funding got cut. I got pretty tired myself, or else I would have kept doing it. I'm actually looking to get my degree, get certified now as a dance teacher, so I can maybe go back into it. Yeah.
That's great. And
Yeah,
talk a little bit about the books you've written previously for teenagers.
sure. Probably more adolescence, but I wrote my first book called Laughable Legends at Middle School 99. It's 18 short stories for reluctant readers. If you look on YouTube for David Paris books, there are a whole bunch of them are animated. And that first book was written really as a experiment with one of my classes, actually a few of my classes, as a New Year's resolution, 2017, and where I wanted to teach the kids that to go after your goals. And I had this goal, I tell some good stories. Maybe I'll write a book. And from January through June, each month I would write a few stories and tell them about my process. And in the end, the book, I have to warn people, adults do not like it. It is not an adult friendly book. They'll read the stories and think this should never have been published. And it wasn't, it was self published. But kids, especially reluctant readers, cannot put it down. So this was for me super exciting. Took me about 3 years to write the second one, which I'm just about finished with. Super exciting. And then right before I got sick, I spent 3 years on a book called Middle School Election. It's a satire about a middle school student named Kevin King who represents Donald Trump. And it's amazing. It's historical. So all it's footnoted. So everything he did represents exactly what happened in the middle school election. So it's kind of fun for kids because it's interesting character. He's very negative. I warn you ahead of time. He does some things. Well,
Hmm.
I try to be balanced with it. My friend told me it's a leftist book. I try to keep a balanced perspective. And the Hillary Clinton character also gets lambasted quite a bit. Um, but I think it's a great read for families, especially if you want to say, how did this guy get elected? Whether you're a Trump fan or not, you could see it's completely covers all the big things in middle school, in Trump's election. And then the second book I wrote, because once I finished it, I thought, well, I need to do his presidency as well. I did a similar book with the presidency called Middle School President. Also on YouTube, lots and lots of stories. If you look on davidparisbooks.com, or sorry, David Paris Books on YouTube, you can see a lot of these stories animated.
Wow. And the animators you work with, are they local or do you work with like international animators?
I don't have money for the local ones, but yeah, my people, I have a guy coordinates it from Germany, and he uses people from around the world.
So have these books been translated into other languages?
Oh, I when I get to that level, I'll be a happy guy, but I'm not it's not that level yet.
And have you getting a lot of like feedback from students like nationwide who like your books?
I do. The students love it, and the parents tend not to. So
Mhm.
it's a tough sell because the kids don't buy the books. They want everything for free on YouTube, which is why I put it up there. Uh,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's very. I wrote it. I didn't read it for. I didn't write it for adults. I wrote it for kids,
Mhm.
and kids they because the stories are short. My own attention span is pretty short,
Mhm.
so I would read some of the stories out loud or after school to kids. And anytime there was something boring, I'd cut it immediately. So I just left what was most essential and most funny, and the result is like 4 or 5 page stories that really capture your interest.
Wow. So David, if you don't mind, I would like to start discussing your book, A COVID Story. It's a very powerful, very, very intense book. So in the book, you talk about how you were first contracted COVID-19 in March of 2020, and that you were hospitalized, I guess, total for 88 days with you were in a medically induced coma for 32 days. So in the book, tell the audience about like how you went about, gathering the testimonies and the oral history of the different people that are featured in the book.
Yeah, I wrote the book. People from the very beginning said, Dave, you need to write a book. And I thought to myself, why do people want to hear from me? That didn't make sense. But what I thought did make sense is collecting the stories of everybody involved. So I interviewed a whole bunch of the doctors, the nurses, the physical therapists, the occupational therapists, my family, everybody who was involved in my teaching community, my artistic community. And my original plan was to give everybody a chapter. What at some I forget, I think it was November, I thought to myself, what actually makes sense from all these interviews I did is to just piece it together like an oral history. So everybody's voice, it would have more. I wanted something that had a lot of flow. So everybody would speak, maybe they would share maybe 2 or 3 sentences, and then somebody else would speak about what somebody else said. And my goal was to make it a super readable product. Again, I like things that are easy to read. So 100 pages, quick read, but super insightful and powerful, as it really captures not just my story, but it captures everybody's story. And from one of the nicest pieces of feedback I got was that the book itself is not just my story, it's a human story. It's a story
Mhm.
about people coming together. It's a story about how you can interpret life, where you go, what your new normal is going to be, how do you approach a new normal in life, how do you connect and use people, love around you. And I include answers and I include all my questions. So it's not didactic in any way. It's just really from my experience that I think it's interesting, especially in this time where people deny COVID's existence.
Mhm.
And I think people who will get a very strong sense of what happens to a patient and what happens to a community.
And how long did you work on the book for?
Well, to some degree, I worked on the book from the moment I got up. From the moment, um, because and I say that because I received so much support from people, and the book is just a collection of the stories I would tell people. They kept asking me, what was it like to be in the coma? What was it like before? What's it like in your recovery? And it wasn't that difficult to write because I told the stories 20, 30 times over. And as you know from telling a story many times, you refine things, you figure out what works, what doesn't work. If you start boring your audience and they start talking about something else, you know you lost them. He's like,
Mhm.
all right, I need to change that part of my storytelling. So in some ways, from the very beginning, but I actually didn't originally write it. I wanted to finish the book Middle School President. So I didn't actually start it until November. I gave it to a ghostwriter to do, and then I saw what she put together, and I thought to myself, "No, this is terrible. It needs to have my voice." So in November, I put it together, maybe in about three months, I'd say, about 3 months of writing, and it's a collection of everybody's stories. So I wrote it, but it's also everybody's interviews. So I don't know. That got convoluted. I apologize for that. But how long did it take? About 3 months, starting in November, and but the interviews and the stories really started from the beginning.
The whole time you're being treated for COVID, also including when you're at the rehabilitation, it was all at NYU Medical Center or other facilities.
That's
I'm sorry.
It was all at NYU. I
Hmm.
was in the ICU.
Hmm.
At first, at the hospital, April 3rd. They put me in the ICU, I think April 5th or 6th, if I remember correctly. I was intubated April 9th. I was in the intubation when in a medical coma for 32 days. I stayed in the ICU for another 26 days, and then they moved me to the medical rehab hospital that they have. It's a few blocks down, and I was there for another 30 days.
The medical center is like on the east side of Manhattan.
Yeah, the ICU is on 34th Street and First Avenue, if I
Hmm.
remember correctly, and the rehab center hospital is at 19th Street between First and Second. It might be 17th Street, one of those, but right around there.
In your book, you're talking about, you had to regain your motor coordination skills like through physical therapy and also deal with a speech therapist. Those are like elements of COVID that I wasn't aware of before I read your book. Um, is that usually a common thing for those who've gone through COVID that they've had to, in the rehabilitation, they usually to do that, have to go through a period of having physical therapy and speech therapy.
Yeah, for everybody, they have to do physical, and I don't think there's anybody who was hospitalized that didn't need that.
Mhm.
When I was in the hospital, we would share a center for physical training, and you can see for most people, just even lifting an arm or two arms, or even standing up, was impossible for them to do. And it would take 3 or 4 physical therapists to assist them. Everybody's rehabilitation looked different, but for sure, everybody needed, at the very least, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. From the very beginning, my speech therapist was actually surprised I could speak so well. But the speech therapist also works on your cognition, and just making sure. And when you wake up coming out of intubation, thinking is not easy. You were just
Mhm.
in a dream world for a month, and accepting what goes on in this world is a huge change and not at all easy. And they want to get a sense of where your brain is at. I asked a speech therapist, and I said, how much do I need this? Because I can speak pretty well. And she said, well, a lot of people can't. And she said, and a lot of work that she does is just getting people thinking on a functional level, which they lose once they're intubated. I know that COVID creates a lot of horrible conditions in many different ways for many patients. All of them needed physical therapy of some sort.
Mhm. And are you presently, are there still like side effects of COVID that you're still experiencing?
Yeah, so this is 1 year later. I still have some breathing problems. I think most people who are severely affected, they had some version of long COVID. I also struggle a little bit with fast movement,
Mhm.
and there's some pain still in my body and different. My feet are still a bit numb. Um, so yeah, I'm not 100%. Still striving to get back to 100%, not giving up.
Mhm.
But it's definitely been a long road. And not there yet.
And do you like periodically have to just check in with any doctors at the hospital? They just make sure that is there any elements of COVID that could come back?
Yeah, they're not afraid of it coming back, but they do track me. They want to know what long-term patients, what the prognosis is, and how they're doing. I'm on the end of somebody who's doing well. Compared, I know quite a few people in the hospital who left saying that they needed a oxygen tank for the rest of their lives, that their lungs were more scarred than myself, and it's took a large toll on a lot of people. I think the stories are getting out there, so people will know it's not only life threatening, it's also the quality of life that's going to be threatening to you. And so they're definitely following up on a lot of people to figure out what's the best way to help people for who have long-term symptoms.
One of the elements I really liked about your book is you talk about, like, towards the end of the book about, you had to felt like reevaluating life priorities, and that seems like that's something that I think a lot of people who've gone through COVID do.
Yeah, my roommate laughed at me because she when I told her, she called me when I after the second week I woke up, and I told her my existential questions about life, and she says, Dave, there's no difference between you and I. She said the only difference is you were having a party in your sleep for the last month and a half. We've been dealing with these existential questions, and I thought to myself it was kind of interesting. I would say that the pain I go through as I face those questions are a little more intense than maybe somebody who hasn't gone through. When you have a near death experience, it does wake you up to how you want to live life. Everybody's experiencing it through some level of deprivation by having their life changed. When you get sick, or in my case, you're near death, I actually, I don't know if you know, but my heart actually stopped, and my prognosis was not very good. I was considered the sickest person on the COVID floor. So with what I went through, it definitely changes what is important in life. And the first thought I had when I woke up is, my God, I spent my whole life just thinking of my own pleasure and my own happiness, and what has it left me? I was divorced. I didn't have kids, and I thought I was so insignificant in life, and I really questioned how I was living life. And that turned out to be a great gift, because coming back, the first thing I did is prioritize. I need to be there for my family. I need to be there for my friends. I need to be really less selfish and more connected to people. What counted, I mean, I was always doing something that was substantial and contributed to society as a school teacher. But if I'm admitting the truth, my highest ambition wasn't contribution. My highest ambition was my own success. And when I really looked at the result of that, I actually, in the book, I describe a dream, which in some ways I wonder whether it was a spiritual gift, because in the dream, I achieved everything I ever wanted to achieve. And when I achieved it, a spirit cut me in half and showed me how shallow all my dreams were as a successful acrobatic dancer who achieved everything he always wanted. And in from that moment, 1 year later, I've never had this drive to have success at the expense of wanting to be with other people. And that spirit changed me forever. And, I don't know if it was really a spirit, but it's certainly something in my mind that said seeking your own satisfaction without connection to others is really a shallow way of living. That became very acute through the near death experience, through being in the coma, through waking up. And then every moment, I think it's cliche, but it's really true, you start appreciating every little thing: the sun shining, the little taste of food, a phone call, somebody being kind. And to this moment, I see somebody do something sweet, and I melt. And my heart used to be quite hard. I'm a New Yorker, so I heard I was listening to one of your earlier podcasts. You moved to New York in your college years, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so it's great. You've been here a long time, but this city hardens you,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up here, so there's something that makes it's great because it makes you tough, but it's also doesn't allow you to feel as much sometimes when you have to toughen up. And I know that this experience actually melted that tough exterior in a lot of ways that I really treasure and value. That I don't recommend it for other people. It's a very expensive and dangerous way to have a life experience. You know, you can do it
Mhm.
without doing it that way. But I did see it as something that's transformative of how I want to live.
I really love, David, like the different dream sequences within the book. And like I had surgery back in 2008, and I remember like sleep deprivation, and then I also sort of had nightmares still when I got home from the hospital of like being woken up by the middle of the night of having like doctors and nurses around. Do you still experience ever like kind of weird dreams being home now, like even a year later,
Yeah,
still being there?
what's toughest for me is the dreams. People who go through medical comas or um, real comas. Well, they're both real, I guess, but they all describe that in between that dream state as being something enjoyable and being in touch with a spiritual presence or God. I don't can't say it was God, but I can say for me, my experience was level of warmth and connection that I actually was experiencing great love. And to this day, my dreams are a place of, wow, this is, I actually feel something connected in the world. And when I wake up, that's actually the hardest part, is putting my feet on the ground here, coming up with what I want to do in this world. Because in the dream world, life is great. And it was like that in when I had in the coma as well. I did though, when I woke up, even though I spent a month with really pleasant dreams, those first 2 weeks, yeah, I had the worst nightmares in the world. I didn't want to go to sleep. Actually, I would stay up as late as I could until 5, 6 in the morning until the daytime nurse came in, who I just loved. And once he was there, I knew I could. I felt safe. So I would stay up all night because I didn't want the nightmares, and the disorientation was horrendous. And it was interesting. The My occupational therapist put up signs to say, "You are loved. You are here. You're getting better." And my dance partner had put up posters of me dancing acrobatics, and that helped me whenever I woke up to find placement in the world. But those in between states, when you come out of a intubation, it's the worst. It's really really hardcore. I don't experience that in that same way. That went away after maybe 2 or 3 weeks, but I still struggle with the calm and ease that a dream has, and still entering this world every day. Really.
David, do you mind talking a little bit about like your use of the two wolves metaphors in the book? Was that like from like a Cherokee legend?
Lakota, I think. But yeah, that legend is a beautiful legend. For those people aren't familiar with it, an elder was talking, an indigenous elder from North America. He was talking to his grandson about that there are two wolves inside of us, and they're battling. One is negative and one is positive. And this grandson asks, "Who will win?" And the grandfather says, "The wolf that you feed." And I use that metaphor, that legend, throughout the book, and still use it to this day, because I had a hard time deciding, was I stricken with a horrible bad luck, somebody who was relatively young and healthy, and suddenly I was hospitalized and almost killed? Was this unlucky, or was I lucky because I got great medical care and they put me on a ventilator and a special machine called ECMO that only NYU had, and I was brought back from the depths of despair. And it really gave, for me, it's a wonderful metaphor at all moments to think, how do I want to live? Because we all get to interpret reality, um, and there are things that happen, but what we do about what happens is really our choice. And that for me was, from the very beginning of waking up, a decision that I made. For In the beginning, I was very thankful, and then there was a week where I said, you know what? I'm not just, because everybody's telling me, oh, it's so miracle, it's miraculous, you're alive, it's wonderful, and I really felt that way. And then one week I thought to myself, wait a second, I want to be dancing. I want to be doing so much more. I can barely move. I can't even change the remote. I'm so weak. Some of my body's numb. I have all this pain. I'm not lucky. This is horrible. And I spent a week in the depth of pain and despair. And that's when I realized, what story do I want to tell about what's happening? And it didn't, the more I fed the wolf that was just seeing myself as unlucky, the more depressed I got. It didn't help in any way. And only when I started feeding no, there is something special here. There's meaning I can make out of this experience. There is love. I was supported by a medical community, my my community outside of medicine, my family, my friends. This is actually a momentous experience and a wonderful opportunity to cherish life. And choosing, we get to choose the story we're living. And once that is clear, you choose what you want to feed, what empowers you, not what disempowers you. And I use that throughout the book, whether it's my recovery, whether it's the mental struggles that sometimes come with this experience, whether it's physically, oh, I can't dance, I can't move my left arm, I can't walk, but I can move my right arm and make a lovely gesture, and just enjoying that gesture in its fullness and being pleased with what I'm doing rather than needing to do something. And having that perspective of enjoying my process rather than a product helped me center into who I was, who I am, and what actually gives me pleasure and meaning in life instead of what I think should be.
It
Is
was,
that, sorry, I'm going to ask you a
mhm.
20 question. Did that make sense?
Yeah,
If it
definitely.
doesn't, I'll try to explain that better. Most people don't ask me that question, so I don't get to usually ask that answer it that way.
No,
Did that make sense?
yes, it did. Yeah. It was like very touching in the book when you mentioned when you're coming home from the hospital and you're entering Brooklyn, and there were a bunch of people like with signs and like greeting you as you came back. I think you was it like on Flatbush Avenue?
Yeah, it was actually right in front of my house, my apartment
Wow.
building, and it really looked like a protest at first, and then I looked at, oh, let's see what they're protesting. Black Lives Matter was in had protests going everywhere, and I knew that they actually originated. A lot of the marches originated just 2 blocks from my house, so I thought, okay, maybe they moved up in front of my apartment building. And when I read the signs, it had my name on it. I thought to myself, that seems a bit odd. And then I started recognizing faces, and it was probably up there at the 3 or 4 best experiences in my life, which to see people from my acrobatic community, from my school, from my way back from high school, from college, all different places where they chose to come out to just support me in my return. Because like I said earlier, I actually struggled with feeling significant and not knowing that I made a difference in the world. And I valued only that. My sense of value was: are you a father? Are you a husband? And do you? This is what's important in life. And it was confusing that I didn't have that. And I thought to myself, what have I really done? And then when I came home and I saw people I'm very close to, and then people I know just even a little bit that I helped or connected to along the way, they all came out. There are probably 50, 60 people, maybe more. I might be undercounting that, but they all littered the streets with shirts and signs and cheering.
Wow.
And for them, they were there to support me, and they were there to support, we're gonna come together as a community, and we wanna. They were so happy I was alive, and they wanted to show it. And it was hard for them when I was in the hospital. Just I, my sister was the gatekeeper for who was talking to me, so I didn't get to communicate to everybody. I communicated with quite a few people, but not everybody. But this was people just saying, "Look, we love you, and we're behind you," and that to me helped me so much. To this day, it just helps me undo that part of you, part of everybody. I think who we feel we're not significant enough, and knowing that everything we do is significant to somebody in some way that really matters.
And are there like any like support groups or people who've gone through COVID? Like, are you a part of that, or are you aware of that? People that can talk about like their struggles and coming back into society after being in the
Yeah,
hospital for a while.
I'm a part of a few groups,
Hmm.
and I think right now there's a group called Body Politics. Another one called HQ Survivors, I think, something like this. And I'm part of a Facebook group, and I look, and it's good, it's useful. I My own network of support has been more working with people, my therapist, and just connecting to friends. I know that when I work with people who've been through intense experiences, what's interesting to me is when I tell people how much agony I feel at different times mentally, I start having, I can't tell you how many people start sharing their stories and that they never told me before. I never knew. One friend was a 9/11 survivor and also was at the Las Vegas shooting. I was like,
Alright.
dude, you never told me that, you know? And he's
Mhm.
like, yeah. And I dozens, not dozens, but at least a dozen people have shared with me their own what the weights they're carrying with them. And to me, having that level of support where I know people are also fighting as hard as they can for their lives and overcoming difficult moments in their life, that for me has been the most support. I also, the COVID support groups are great sometimes when you hear people specifically saying, hey, how do I handle this problem? Are you experiencing brain fog? I know when I share my story, I was on one panel and I was telling them, yeah, man, I just feel so irritable and like, I'm just like not the best person to be around. And the other guy was so happy. He's like, nobody's talking about that. I'm so irritable too. My partner, really is dealing with me, but I know I'm a mess. And sometimes sharing those stories with other COVID patients, yeah, that's a level of support that's been very super useful, both me hearing and then me sharing my story as well. Which is why I wrote the book, by the way. I wanted people to, I want people who have COVID to know they're not alone. I also want to share because it's a communal story. I want other people to know what it means to support somebody to reclaim their lives. What is it, and how important that is to do everything that you can do to help them.
And how has the public reaction been so far to the book? Besides the podcast you've already appeared on, have you had like any press or appeared like done any like interviews like
I've
online?
done, I've just started. I have limited amount of time, unfortunately, between back at work and so I'd like to do more. But I gave out free copies to a lot of people, maybe because it's free, but they all love it. But I know that it's actually legitimate because they give it to other people and then those people also love it. So it's getting excellent reviews from word of mouth. I have been on two podcasts before this, and I haven't pushed myself to market it more than this, but I'm trying trying to get that story out there. Yeah.
And talk a little about the two illustrators for the book, Joe and Sergi. Have you known them for a while, or you just
Yeah,
really?
Joe has been in, he illustrated parts of my first book, half the first book, and my second and my third book. And it was interesting to use illustrators because, I write adolescent fiction for the most part, and you wouldn't think that an adult book would need an illustrator. But I thought to myself, let me see what he can do. And Joe just changed from a comic perspective to this very deep, expressive story through his illustrations that gave it life in a way that when people read the script and then actually saw it with illustrations, it said, wow, it's a whole nother level. And I love this guy so much anyway, but the work that he added it adds an emotional perspective because we talked about all of the things that happened and then he translated that into pictures. And I'm so thankful for that. But I also included Sergi. He did two oil paintings because one was the Buddha. Now there's a dream uh, when I was in a coma very early in my experience where I realized I was going to die. And I had a Buddha who's a gatekeeper telling me, no, you're going to die. And I had to fight for my life. That moment for me could not be done by conventional illustration. And I asked another guy who I kind of liked, I said, look, can you do an oil painting that gets the surreal nature of this experience? He did it. He did two paintings for me. One was the Buddha and the other one was struggling off the side of a boat trying to live. And I added both of those. I think it's a little conventional to use two illustrators, but I I'm a bit unconventional. What can I say?
Are there any plans to maybe like have you thought about maybe like adapting the book into a full length like graphic novel or have it as like an animated feature?
Yeah, I don't know about an animated feature. I have been getting feedback that people love the illustrations and want more. They
Mhm.
wanted more of that, and I am interested in that. It's just way beyond my budget. It's a bit expensive to do. If it ever becomes of interest to people, and there's enough, yeah, for me, if there's enough interest, I would absolutely love to do either of those things. I definitely think a graphic novel. Um, would add so much to it. And I do get a lot of that feedback. Uh, and yeah, it's possible, maybe.
Are there any upcoming projects that you're currently working on? Are you working on any other books right now?
Yeah, I'm finishing Laughable Legends Volume 2. I finished the stories right before I got sick, and I'm just waiting for another illustrator to free up some time. And he's the guy who worked on the first volume. I also am working on social emotional learning projects, teaching adults, teaching teachers what activities really work in the classroom. There, I have like 85, 90 books that I read, and I, for 5 years, I did tons of just experimented with what works and what doesn't. And I want to streamline. Hey, these are the games that you know are going to help build community. Kids are going to really be open up and share. It works, and I'd love to just get that out for other teachers. I might. It's a little hard to do. I might do middle school fraud. So that would be the part three of the middle school election, middle school president. Middle school fraud would be the part of Trump where he declared the election a fraud, and
Mhm.
eventually there was a Capitol riot. I don't know if it's necessary to do, but I had some inkling to maybe do that. I'm not sure.
Wow.
Yeah,
And are you back to like, are you doing like online teaching right now with students?
I do. I'm the second. I work with another teacher, but more because I it's still hard for me to do a lot of work, and then I write a lot of curriculum for social emotional learning curriculum for the school.
And I've read like many articles about how a lot of students are struggling with online learning now, and like how do you feel from your viewpoint? Is it the kids that you work with, are they pretty easygoing, or do you feel that a lot of them are struggling?
Absolutely a mix,
Yeah.
and we're all just trying to figure out what's gonna best help students. It's not the ideal situation, and we're all learning as we go along to what's gonna help the most. And I can't tell you how many educators are so excited for September when we
Hmm.
approach normalcy and some
Hmm.
version.
Do you mind sharing, David, any unusual stories on your journey, either when you're writing your book or in regards to your background in education?
Yeah, unusual stories. Sorry,
Mhm.
just well, unusual stories. I I would say this whole experience has been pretty
Mhm.
unusual. I'd say like more than what is already unusual. I don't know if anything more. This has definitely been the most transformative experience in my life. I never saw I never saw having a near-death experience as something that would both bring me closer to life rather than further away from life. So to top that or even come close to that, I don't think I have something that comes up the top of my head. I would just say this experience would is
Mhm.
really the pinnacle of an unusual story for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest joys and challenges of either through your writing or through your dance career or through your education career?
Sure. For me, I'd say the biggest joy, I love social emotional learning. That for me has been I love teaching, and I love teaching English. I love teaching writing, connecting to kids and helping them grow. But when we started focusing in my school on the individual students and their own emotional struggles, how to be a good friend, how to get along, how to approach their learning in a way that's going to empower them, how to go about their studies in a different way, how to feel connected to other people. This for me, being a part of something that was uplifting kids' emotional experience that I always enjoyed teaching kids how to write and read better and present, but I especially love getting to them to be more of who they want to be. And that to me is just has been an enormous joy. And to do that, it took a lot of training. I'm a nonviolent communication teacher, so from that, I could say one of my best moments is, nonviolent communication is also known as compassionate communication. Sees the world as everybody thinking or doing, acting out of universal needs. That there's a need behind every thought and everything that we do. And if you can connect to those needs, you step out of judgment, you step out of what should or shouldn't be going on in the world and good and evil, and people's motivation around just wanting something that everybody wants. And by doing that, you can connect compassionately to anybody in any experience, and you connect to yourself in any experience. And you would think it's pretty simple but advanced concept that's empowering. It is absolutely adaptable to middle school. And I taught it in middle school every year and saw kids not only offer each other what we call empathy, um, identifying what people are needing, and at first what they're feeling, to um, what they're feeling and needing. And then they would actually do it not just with each other, they could do it at home. And I would get contact from parents. It's like, wow, it's amazing stuff that you're teaching here. And my kid is opening up more, sees the world differently. To be a part of that has been an enormous joy in improving the world. Yeah. As a dancer, well, I love performing. I've done it now probably for 20 years or so. And there's never a time to some degree, when I did a Mexican bolero in Mexico City, that was one of my favorite performances. We did a new move that I only did 3 times in my life on TV. That became my special moment. When I was performed for the first time with my mother in the audience, that was my favorite show. I don't think there's a show that I don't have that in some way I'm not connecting to the audience and feel proud about what I'm doing. But even more than performing, I love learning new things. The ability to spin somebody around my body, throw them in the air, catch them, and do something new and spectacular it brings me so much joy, and so much around the immense feeling of accomplishment and achieving something. And it's just an expression that, for whatever reason, gives so much meaning and power, even if I don't ever perform it. It's just being able to do it. It's like, wow, that's pretty cool. If I can put my hands underneath somebody's feet and just lift them up in the air, toss them up over my head, it's amazing, and nothing else needs to happen. So that brings me immense joy. Yeah.
And I guess hopefully eventually you're gonna return to dance. I guess like within a year.
That's my goal.
Yeah.
My dance partner and she's back in New York City, and I started doing some overhead lifts with her on my right side. My left side, I can barely lift about 10 pounds. I used to be able to lift 2 people over my head at the same time. And it's a bit daunting because I'm going through exactly how I trained hundreds of people. I have to go through the same training again. When you are in a coma and you start losing weight, your body eats your muscle more than the fat. So during that month, the good news is I lost weight, which was good. I've always trying to lose weight. The bad news, it ate almost all my muscle. So I couldn't even lift my arm when I woke up. So it was not easy gaining that strength back. Now I can lift somebody with my right arm, over my partner over my head, my right arm. My left arm is not so great. But my goal is to, yeah, flip them again. And I would say it's probably 6 months or a year away. When I first woke up, I thought it was a month away. So I tend to be on the positive side. So I
Mhm.
can't say for sure, but I have a organizer who runs the Bachata Festival in Washington, D.C. He wants me to do a comeback performance this August. So that's what I'm shooting for.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I like the different. I checked out some of your previous dance competition videos. So you've been able to like travel like all over the world. And which was any particular countries that you really enjoyed doing the dance work at?
Sure. This might sound surprising, but I love performing in India more than
Mhm.
anywhere else. And partly because they have such a rich dance culture, and partly the enthusiasm they had they love spectacular shows. And what my dance partner Zoe and I do, we love the spectacle, And because our routines are nonstop spectacles, uh, it's appreciated everywhere, but in India it was a whole nother level. And it might be because I love Indian food. I'm not 100% sure, but definitely India would be up there. When we were in Australia, we also did one of my favorite people in the world, we did a quartet, and that we did a quartet and we put together in about 2 or 3 hours and got a standing ovation at the biggest salsa convention in Australia. That for me was spectacular. There's a guy in Japan who coordinates the Japanese salsa dance. A lot of our shows are through salsa conventions. that also was special because of our, I would say, here I go. I'll go on and on listing all the places. All of them are special. Probably India stands out. Maybe in also doing a Mexican bolero in Mexico City, where they saw that we were dancing a song to them that meant so much. That to me was one of the most spectacular. And again, I don't know. Maybe it was the food. I'm not. I'm never sure whether food is giving me the most joy or the acrobatics. I'm not. I'm not 100% sure. But Mexico and probably India.
Have you had like any other COVID survivors who've read your book, and if so, like what has their feedback been like?
Yeah, they what's interesting from other COVID survivors, they of course love the story. And what's interesting is they experience the same exact stuff. So for them, especially the people who are intubated, they appreciated the commonality, and it almost was like I was telling their story. So that actually is one of the reasons I know it's an important resource for people. I'm not just it's a COVID story, it's my story, but I know it's really quite a lot of people have experienced the same thing.